Welcome to Melt. I'm Suresh Venkat. Last month, analytics company Kantar unveiled the third edition of its Creative Effectiveness Awards in India. These awards, which are judged using consumer research and link tests, celebrate creativity that works to enhance brand sales. This year, ads from Google, Hindustan Unilever, Burger King, Haleon, Godrej Consumer Products, Mamaearth and Welspun emerged as the winners. Alongside the awards, Kantar also released a report with insights on how to create successful advertising. To know more, we are in conversation with Soumya Mohanty, Managing Director and Chief Client Officer, South Asia Insights Division at Kantar. Is there a formula for maximum effectiveness? Do formats and durations truly matter to the consumer? Let's find out as we get ready to melt with Soumya Mohanty. You have a new report on creative effectiveness. What are the top three findings?
Very hard to say. There are three findings, a lot of findings. But if you were to say what are the top three findings, I would say creativity can be effective. That's the top finding. The fact that we are awarding creatives that have actually shown that they can lead to short-term results for the brand as well as help in building the brand in the mid to long term. I think that's the first one. The second one I would say is around digital, which is where most of the spends are going towards now. More than 50% of spends are being spent online today. And what we do find is that there are challenges, especially around establishing the brand in digital creative when we advertise digitally. I think that's the second big finding, that we need to be a little more conscious when we advertise online. And the third one is the need for consistency and coherence across all the touch points we use when we are communicating with the consumers. I would say these are the three top findings of this year's awards.
Your report uses the word coherence quite a few times when I studied the report. What exactly does this mean in terms for the marketer?
So coherence, simply put, is consistency. So when we are talking to the consumer across different touch points, whether it is television, whether it's online, whether it is hoardings, whether it is influencer marketing. I mean, we are talking to the consumer all the time today, right? I mean, you're pretty much following her through her entire journey. When you do that, it's very important the way you speak to her. There's a consistency in that. It should not appear that there are different brands talking to the same consumer when you are in different medium. That is what coherence or consistency means. Now, that could simply be the color palettes you use, jingle that you use, a music which is similar, a celebrity which is the same across. But effectively, when I see a piece of communication, I should immediately say, aha, it's for this brand. I think that's what coherence is.
I think a lot of e-commerce brands might need to hear that, because you can't tell one e-commerce piece of advertising from another. Moving on, one of the big headlines in your report is that urban India likes creative storytelling and rural India prefers more direct communication. I suspect there's going to be a little bit of controversy about this finding, but tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it pretty simply, rural India or Bharat is more concerned about what is in it for me. So tell me exactly what it is about. What is the category benefit? What is the product benefit? Urban India was also there at some point in time, but it has moved on a bit into more metaphorical, more layered storytelling. Moved on to ads as entertainment, different from ads as information. So urban India is a little more comfortable with entertainment, with stories, and actually likes it with drama, as long as there is product still embedded in it. In rural, it's more about, if I'm going to spend X amount of time, tell me exactly what is in it for me. And therefore, tell me directly what is the product you're talking about, what is the price point, what should I do next?
But Soumya, if advertisers started following this guideline, won't all advertising aimed at rural markets roughly look the same?
I don't think there is advertising that gets created for rural markets, by the way. There is just advertising that gets created. And a lot of that advertising just gets created in a room many times, not necessarily tested as well. So we create advertising and then we take it to different markets. So whether they look the same, and in fact, we just now mentioned something about, a lot of e-commerce players would say ads are looking very similar because differentiation. So you need to be consistent within the brand, but you also need to be differentiated versus other brands. So it's very important to think of your target audience, your cohort, the culture in which you are, or the context in which you are advertising, and the medium in which you are advertising. So your cohort, your context, and your medium, all three make a lot of difference to the way your advertising is getting processed.
Your study also says that humor is important in creating impact, right? Are there any rules to using humor? Does your study reveal anything about how humor should and should not be used?
So humor, the study doesn't exactly say that humor is extremely important. It is important. We know from all the work that we have done that humor is important. Humor brings that dramatic moment at which if you have your brand embedded in it, it's going to stay in the memory. So I think that's the role humor can play. What is, in terms of the rules of the humor, I'll take the second part of it. A lot of times what we get wrong when it comes to humor is humor becomes the center stage and not the product or the brand or the category. So it's more, we are trying to evoke laughter rather than put the laughter in context of the brand that we are talking about. So I think that's where we tend to go wrong. Plus, let's just keep in mind, people are very sensitive nowadays to different types of humor. So what could be funny for us is not funny for a lot of other people. And that's where many brands have got into controversies, whatever you want to call it. So use humor, but use humor only if it is in the strategy of your brand. If your brand is a fun, humorous, pranky brand, then use humor. But if your brand is a serious brand, just don't do humor for the sake of eyeballs. And be careful. Be careful. You will not please everybody.
So, Soumya, one of the things that's clear is keeping the product front and center, whether it's metaphorical or a literal ad, seems to be critically important. Now, this seems like a fairly obvious insight. Why do you think so many marketers miss the trick on this one?
Which all insights is obvious. The point is, it's the mix that comes through. It's an obvious thing that product should be at the center of it, right? It's an obvious thing that this conversation we are having has to be engaging. But how it comes through is where the challenge lies. And that is where you need to test among consumers. I'll tell you why. Because consumers may not be able to differentiate between a good and a great advertising. Normally, good and great, it's very hard. But between a bad or a poor advertising and an okay or good to go advertising, you will at least be able to make out the difference. And the challenge today is we are putting out a lot of poor advertising. Advertising that is at times insensitive, advertising that is risky or controversial for the sake of it, advertising that has nothing to do with the product or the category, but is just trying to break clutter. Now, some of those things you could avoid if you had actually spoken to consumers before you put out that advertising. So yeah, it's intuitive, but not easy to get the mix right.
So Soumya, that's a fantastic insight you just said. It's not easy to differentiate good advertising from great advertising because that distinction between good and great you're saying is not obvious. Tell me a little bit more about this difference between good and great.
Great advertising sometimes happens because of the context that you are in, because of the ecosystem, that moment, or when you capture the mood or the essence of the moment. Effectively, when we test advertising, we can tell you whether it's going to be acceptable or not. Is it in our top box or not? But sometimes even advertising which is in the middle box, in perhaps not the 90th percentile, but the 85th percentile, can still do well because the brand is carrying that momentum and you are capturing the mood of the moment. So a lot of the advertising, and I don't want to use advertising that we have celebrated recently because I don't want to speak about current advertising, but a lot of the advertising that, let's say, we grew up with, if you look at the advertising by Pepsi or by Coca-Cola, they captured the mood of that moment. And that's why you remember the ads after so long, choice of the new generation, or Thanda matlab Coca-Cola. Now, were they great from word go? They were good ads, but it just was so apt and so relevant for that moment in which the ad was getting consumed that it turned out to be great advertising. So effective advertising is the baseline that you need. You're spending money. It has to be effective. But if you layer creativity to it, if you layer your, intuition to it, that's when it becomes great advertising.
Okay. Now let's actually talk about the winners of the Creative Effectiveness Awards this year, right? The brands that you awarded. What's common to all the winners?
The interesting thing is nothing is common. Can I say that? Because there is no formula. There are intuitive truths, there are rules of the game, but there is no formula of how to get it right, which is why we always say test it. But look at one of the things, they're all true to the brand strategy. So if you talk about Surf Excel, right? They've pretty much remained on that strategy for a very long time, right? The stains are good, daag achhe hain. The strategy remains the same. The execution, how I'm making that point changes. And it's always a story and always deep emotions embedded into that story. Very good storytelling. One of the highest rated ads that we have tested is actually the Red Label ad, which won the Food and Beverage award this year. It's one of our best tested ad, and that I have been a part of that journey, and we kept testing. We have tested multiple times to get to that point. It's a slice of life. It's a storytelling ad, but it's also again, there's a deep human truth there. There's a deep human insight. There's emotions into it, and there's a story to it. And that's the point I was making, Suresh. Story, emotion, drama works in general, across. But the story could be humorous. The story could be just pure emotions. It could be a tragedy. It could be a comedy. It could be anything. But there has to be a story, and there has to be sort of relevance to the consumer that you are talking about. If you are true to your brand strategy, generally speaking, you are able to come to a creative which is effective. The challenge, the problem happens that when you start the other way around, that I am going to create a clutter-breaking advertising. That's when the problem happens. I mean, normally people should not be doing that, but you do see a lot of that as well.
Your report also says that creativity needs to make an impact in 15 seconds. That's a very short time, right? And do you think this trend is going to go till we reach about 2 seconds, 5 seconds? Where is all this going to end?
Attention plan shrinkage is a fact, right? And where it is going to end is as much your guess as mine. But 15 seconds as a format has definitely increased, at least in the way we are testing. A lot of the ads in our database are now 15-second formats. And they are proving to be quite as effective. They're definitely quite as effective as other ads. So how do you get your message across within 15 seconds is going to be really important. And one of the things we are finding is a lot of clients come back and they ask us to look at the longer format ad and tell us which are the parts which I should retain when I edit it. And that's a lot of the work we do is actually in that area. And most of the time, we actually say you should retain that category moment of truth, or that category magnifier, brand magnifier, whatever you want to call it, that moment in which in that drama or whatever you are showing, your brand or product makes an entry. That is the moment which is very important to retain in your 15 second, and always introduce the brand early. Very important to have the brand introduced early.
Soumya, tell us a little bit about your research process.
Okay, so this actually is not a single research report. It sort of appears like that, but it's through the entire year we keep testing ads. We keep retesting ads before they are aired. Each ad or each copy would be tested in a minimum of about 200 odd people, and going up to whatever, 600, 700, depending upon which are the regions in which you test. And then what we do, and the process we use is called Link, which is a validated tool that has been in, I think it's about 35 years now of Link. So it's a incredibly validated tool. So what we do after that, we take all these responses, and there are two broad measures in which the copy is assessed. There are a lot of measures, a lot of diagnostics we ask the consumer, but there are two broad areas that we look at. One is, can this copy drive short-term sales? And can this copy actually help you in mid to long-term brand building? And we put those two together and we arrive at, call it roughly a score. And on that score, we then look at everything that we have tested through the entire year, and we arrive at this short list of copies and winners from there. So that's the process. It's a long process. It's an annual process. We don't set out to give awards. Let me make it clear. We don't set out to give awards. We just test ads. And we realized some 3 years back that we test so many ads. Why don't we look at a consumer-based award system? Because there is no consumer-based awards for ads. It's always judged by the industry themselves. So why not have a consumer-based awards? And that's how we started this journey.
So, Soumya, advertising is clearly both about strategy and tactics.
Right.
Some things build a brand for the long term and something increase sales tomorrow.
Yeah.
How does your study measure these two, not contradictory, but sometimes unrelated activities?
Yeah. So as I said, we measure both. For every copy, we measure short-term sales and we measure mid to long-term brand building. Now, for some categories, short-term sales is way more important, right? Because you are, if you're in impulse category, it's incredibly important. For some categories, if you're advertising automotive, There's nothing like a short-term sale. It's a lot about brand building. So we measure both, and then depending on the category, it gets interpreted in that way. So both are important. And Suresh, when we say there is no long-term without short-term, right? And there is no short-term without long-term. So this short-term, long-term is a debate we should put to rest. Everything should build the brand. Everything should build the brand. And the moment you build the brand, you will create sales. So it's not just tomorrow's sales. You will create sales for future. And I think this activation advertising and brand building advertising you'll never get around it. So our view is focus on building the brand, focus on your brand strategy, and ensure that it's activated in store, activated, in your go-to market. But when you are talking to the consumer, you have to talk about the brand, because that's what the consumer is buying.
So you're clearly saying all advertising is brand building advertising. This whole debate between performance advertising and brand building, you're squarely on the side of brand building. Now, your report also talks about brand magnifiers. What are they?
So brand magnifier is that moment when the brand makes an entry and the viewer, it's that moment when the viewer actually connects to the brand, when they are watching the ad. That is the brand magnifier. And that moment is extremely important. When you do an edit, it's extremely important for you to retain the brand magnifier. So one of the things we do in Link is we do facial coding. So as you are watching the ad in the pre-testing, I'm actually watching your expressions. And I know the points at which there are highlights, right, where you are more interested than other points. So it's very important that those are the moments where that is the moment where the brand makes an entry. So that is the brand magnifier.
You also talk about celebrities, Soumya. Now, here's the problem. There are many brands around the world that have been built without using celebrities. There are many brands, especially the cola brands, where celebrities keep hopping back and forth between the brands. And there are still more brands who've suddenly been funded, got lots of money, and they go shopping for celebrities based on who they can afford, who's available, who's not endorsing a rival. Does it make any sense for marketers to follow any rules while choosing a celebrity?
There has to be some rule to it. And there are lots of celebrities now. You have got your top celebrities. You have got your influencers the micro-influencers at the other end of it, who have now become celebrities. So the rule is very simple. They have to be in line with your brand strategy. So many times you have celebrities who are talking about health, right? You associate them with health, and then they're in an absolutely indulgent category. You see them there. Now, either you build the bridge, your copy should build the bridge, that why is this guy who's always talking about health and fitness is suddenly sitting and, indulging. When you build that bridge, then you have a good ad. You have a really good ad because you have built that bridge. But if you can't build that bridge, then you have an ad that doesn't land. And you have to be consistent with celebrities. When you hop celebrities too much, then you don't know who is where, and that could cause a lot of confusion. So I would say consistency, strategy, and relative differentiation versus others. These are the three things keep in mind, whatever you do.
Now, your report also talks about customizing creatives for every platform. Now, that's a very, very expensive process to do. Can a single creative idea work across all platforms without this sort of customization you talk about?
So the idea can remain the same across platforms. It's not actually that expensive. It's more the format that you need to keep changing. When I see an ad on a show reel in Facebook, many times I will not have the audio on. So I should be able to connect without the audio, because the audio may be off when I'm actually scrolling and seeing. When I'm seeing an ad on Insta, it's very different. The format is very different. So it's not so much about the differences in idea. It's actually the same idea. I'm just executing it for the platform.
Okay, so India, we have another problem. We have lots of platforms, which many people in the world have as well. It's been said that India is a different country every 100 kilometers.
Yeah.
So we talked about cultural context and coherence and humor and understandability. How do you create ads for a country that changes every 100 kilometers?
By recognizing it changes every 100 kilometers and not using the same broad brush. So interestingly, we maintain 6 different databases for Link. So, unlike in the rest of the world where you can have just one database representing a country, we have 6 different databases because we realized that there are 6 regions broadly where you find differences in the way they sort of relate to advertising. At least at the broad level, that is what we have found. So, South behaves very differently, North behaves very differently. South has a lot more rational, way of relating to it. North is a little more louder. You need a lot more drama. It's not terrifically different in the way movies are made for different regions. It's not terrifically different in that sense. So to that extent, what is really important is when you are making an ad, even if it's a national copy, at least ensure that you are not alienating anybody. If you are making a regional copy, then you are anyway home. If you're making a national copy, just ensure it transfers across all regions. I think that's the simple message we have.
Okay, one sentence that caught me completely off guard and surprised me, quite frankly. Your report says digital tends to underperform when it comes to branding. Now, managers are spending a real ton of money on the digital medium trying to build their brand. And your report says digital underperforms. What's going on here and what do marketers need to know?
So what this actually means is when I see an ad online, I'm less likely to remember what it was for, which brand it was for, versus when I'm seeing a television ad. And there are many reasons to that, right? When I'm seeing a brand online, I tend to skip a lot more. The skippability quotient is higher. I am in a very fragmented mind space. So it's really important for any online advertising to have the brand very strongly integrated and to come much earlier in the ad. So I shouldn't have to watch the entire thing to know it is an ad for this brand. I should know it is an ad for XYZ brand at the start itself, either through the brand name or just the way the format is. I should be able to say, oh yeah, I have seen this ad before. So if you look at the Surf Excel ads online and offline, I know it's a Surf Excel ad. If you have a jingle, you know broadly it's an ad for that brand. So I think that is where online underperforms. It underperforms because there is so much of clutter, there is so much of advertising, so much of fragmentation that I don't remember which brand this ad was for. That's what we have to get, therefore, right when we are advertising online.
So for all young brand managers watching this show right now, give us 3 rules of thumb for revealing a brand's moment of truth. What should they remember if they watch this interview and they just want a quick cheat sheet?
I feel there is nothing like a digital marketing and offline marketing. And I think there is just marketing and marketing to brand strategy. So remember what your brand strategy is. Remember that the fundamentals of marketing are the same, whether you're online, whether you're offline. You need to be salient, which is breaking the clutter. You need to differentiate compared to your competition, right? That's critical. And you need to be relevant to the consumer. I think that's the second rule. And the final one is, when you are doing all these 3, please be consistent. Please do not change every morning just because you have to give new news. I may be saying something which sounds contradictory, but you need to be consistently differentiated. So I should feel I'm getting new news. I should feel this is a different brand. This is a unique trend-setting brand, but I should feel that all the time. It should not be a different brand each morning. And I think that's something I would definitely tell all the young managers. Understand your brand.
All right. Soumya Mohanty of Kantar, thank you very much for talking to us at Melt.
Thank you. Thanks, Suresh. Thank you.
And with that, it's a wrap on this episode. You can follow Melt on social media. The handle is Ready to Melt, or simply log on to readytomelt.com. If you'd like to follow me, I'm @Suvenk on Twitter. Till next week, goodbye and thanks for watching.